Hello, everyone. My name is Eric K. Thomas, and we are live today with Latoya Drake, who is the head of media representation at Google. Ms. Drake, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Eric. How are you?
I'm doing well, doing well. Just, weather is weathering. We hope for
Is
this. we hope for this New York weather, and the summer is here in full blast. Are you in New York as well?
I am. I'm in New York, suffering with everybody else.
Suffering is terrible, but we're gonna make it through. Awesome, awesome. So today we are going to talk about Google's news equity fund that they recently started. I know the announcement came last year, but I think accepting applications now. But before we get into that, I do want to learn a little bit more about your past history and kind of how you got to this space where you are in this position right now with Google.
Sure, and thank you for the question. I have had just a unplanned career in tech. It wasn't something that I intended to do. It's funny now when you watch TikTok videos and anything else, and they're like, "How to break into tech," and I read them like, "Ooh, how do you do that?" For
Right.
me, it started really years ago when I was in grad school in DC. Started out as an intern at a company that does not exist anymore called
Okay.
AOL. Some of you may
Oh
have used
wow.
AIM.
I still remember my Instagram. I mean, my what do you call it, screen name was
Uh-huh.
Bangin' Wit E. Bangin' Wit E. Years ago.
Classic. Classic material. So I was there for a few moons. That job relocated me to New York, wound up at an agency where Microsoft was my client. And then this is going to sound so easy, like, oh, I just bounced around. But then I
Yeah.
literally one day got an email from Google with a job link that I thought was fake. Who gets jobs at Google? How does that happen?
Right. Right.
And the gig was to be half spokesperson for Google to really try to humanize the brand, talk about the
Okay.
products, the data, the trends. And the other half was working with journalists to tell stories. But what was
Mm,
happening along the way in each of those different points in my career, I was building up this background of really, I would call it bespoke experiences that when Google
okay.
created this job description, I had done pieces of that at other places. When I was at AOL, I had fallen into this role with a boss who made up a job as a spokesperson for AOL to talk about what was trending on AOL search. While I was there, someone was a professor at NYU and I love school, was an adjunct and he couldn't teach his class. He asked me to take his class over. So I somehow became a professor at NYU. So when
Okay.
Google needed someone to sort of be the spokesperson, also talk to journalists about training and educating them. Again, I had this random set of experiences and they
Yeah.
found me, and that's really how it happened. So there wasn't this rhyme or reason. There was no experience that I was setting out to get this job at Google. I was really doing things that I really enjoyed and was good at, and it somehow landed me here.
Awesome. Awesome. That sounds great. So you're here. Tell us what your role is specifically now as the head of media representation at Google.
Yeah, it's a really unique role to the company that really originated with me, and it started in 2020. I feel like if we rewind back to then and try to remind ourselves just how on fire things were. I mean, they still are to a certain degree, but I think the world was burning down. It just really just,
Burden.
spontaneous conflagration all at one point.
Right.
Pandemic, social uprising, systemic racism, all the reckoning. What are we
Mhm.
doing? And we kind
Right.
of stood back, and my team worked specifically on news, which is critically important, and that's how we get informed, that's how we get our
Sure.
information. So we
Sure.
started to think about, what's the role that Google plays and who shows up on our channels and how we enforce certain narratives or don't, just by people looking for news on the platform. With the news initiative the Google News Initiative is something that we launched in 2018. We then
Mhm.
started to think about whose voices are we supporting in terms of storytelling. Who do we partner with? Who do we
Mhm.
build programs with? Can we step back in this moment and not just create something that's a passion project, but create a role that has business rigor, also has could have deep impact outside of this company? So it's not just about me kind of coming in day to day, reading some emails, responding to a few things. It's how can we build some programs that really help a specific set of publishers, storytellers who we haven't impacted, because we now see how deeply important their voices are. It sounds easier than it actually is to kind of stand up a completely new scope of work, but that's what we did. It was the moment. And so we created this role. We got a lot of resources behind it. And so that's largely the work that I've been doing for the past 2 years, being really loud internally. And again, marshaling not just people resources, but financial resources to get them to the people, the organizations and storytellers who need them.
Awesome. So leads us into exactly why we're on this call. So Google's News Equity Fund. What is that?
Yeah, so this was something we announced last year. It's a pretty unique fund in that, and I will caveat this and say it just closed. So I hope people apply. We'll start looking at the applicants now. We started to challenge ourselves with how can we have a really bold impact. If you think about the future of news, the future of information, who gets to tell what stories, how do people seek out information? And in many cases, we go to some of the big players, but sometimes the groups who are kind of under the radar, but are overlooked by mainstream players, big companies like Google, we said, how can we create something specifically for organizations who are run by minorities or create content strictly for underrepresented audiences? So we said, let's create a fund. We have a lot of innovation challenges, which are great programs. If you present an idea to Google, you can get that idea funded. This was something that we said, if you're eligible, how can we get some resources into your hands to do what you need to do to support your business? And that was really the spirit of it. It's a global program, not just something that's in my backyard, not just for New York. It really is global in scope. And I'm really excited that we actually brought it together and made it happen. And feels like one of those things that it's not unique to Google, but we hope we do inspire other platforms like us to introduce similar types of programs so that we can all do big things as a whole.
Yeah, no, it's so good. And I think, Google definitely taking the step to have that conversation. I think so many times as, small Black business, we do get overlooked for opportunities, and specifically for us who don't necessarily have products per se, right? So that's why this particular fund, I think it's so interesting, and definitely something we want to share and let people know that this is happening, because you have a lot of platforms that do reach a niche audience, and those, trendsetters or lifestyle influencers, all that stuff really do come to us either for informative purposes, but really from a media perspective to change particular narratives or particular scriptures and things like that. So this is amazing what you all are doing.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And if you think about it, not just from a news perspective, but from a culture perspective, where things start really bubbling up and really start popping is not within the big mainstream players all the time. They eventually catch up to it and they start talking about what's happening. But for us, there was a real opportunity to kind of step away and say, let's go over there and see what's happening. And I think in many cases, for the time that I've been with Google and the amount of time I work with journalists and storytellers and so on, a lot of people see the company as this big search box and who works there and how can you find somebody if you need something. So with us and with the work we're trying to do, we try to humanize it a bit and not wait for people to come find us, but let's go find those groups and say, we're here, we hear you, we see you, we want to help.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about what someone, if someone was to, they have already applied, because I know you said it's closed now. What do you look for? What does your team look for application, or saying someone who actually, this particular organization deserves this fund or X amount or whatever it may be?
Yeah, with this one, it's really straightforward. We look to see if you met the eligibility criteria, which we'll start to look at in the coming weeks. In terms of size, were you, and we specifically targeted groups that were between 1 and 50. So not really super huge platforms, but really wanted to get some small hyper local players. The types of the audience that you reach and the types of stories that you tell. And how do you really reach an underrepresented audience? So those were just a few of the criteria that we set out. Again, to make this something that, and this isn't the last that you'll see from Google in this space, but this particular thing, we wanted to make it low lift. We wanted to just say, there's a place where you can just go and get the resources that you need. Yes, we do lots of other boot camps. We do lots of workshops. As I said, we do many, many innovation challenges, but this was just a different approach that we're taking in terms of how to get out some resources. And it's the first time we've done something explicitly like this. So it's a great test case, and we really look forward to the feedback from those who have applied. And once we know who the recipients are, to see if this works, if there's more appetite for it, so that we can build on it and make it better.
Awesome. So in terms of recipients and what they receive, so we know it's a fund, we know there are financial resources they get. Are there any more that comes into it from like maybe mentorship, or, you know, maybe there are opportunities where it's like, oh, we have people that could help you from, you know, communication perspective or advertising, marketing, things like that. Are there anything that kind of helps them beyond the financial aspect of it as well?
Yes, that's definitely our intention. I will say this, we know that funding is one thing and it's great, but there is a lot more behind the curtains at Google that people would like to have resources to. So yes, we're looking specifically at who can we then, after we funded you, is there any more opportunity with some of these groups? Can we help you with some of our, when I say we do trainings and resources and boot camps, we know that there's a bigger need. If you're thinking about growing a subscriptions business, we have teams who work on that, who teach you how to really understand the data and how you reach subscribers and convert people from just readers to paying customers. How can we bring you into some of that? How can we make some of our tools, we have a lot of insights and analytics tools. How can we make some of that available to you and help you learn how to understand what you got there? So yes, this is more than we wrote a check and then we walked away. There's more to the story, because the work doesn't end there. So that's absolutely what we're trying to build on with this program, with this being a step one.
Awesome. And your goal for this, you know, outside of, yes, we're funding these Black companies, but from a Google perspective, like, what is it that they really, you know, wish to accomplish by having this particular initiative?
What we really want to try and do is make sure there is a wealth of diverse sources and information available, and that these types of companies and storytellers can sustain themselves. That is what the goal is. We know that, yes, we can create these programs. Yes, we can write the check and start and bring you in and continue to work with you. But our end goal is to make sure there's some sustainability there. How can we help the ecosystem as a whole? And what are the different ways that we can do that? Again, sometimes it's funding, sometimes it's training, sometimes it's partnership. It is to make sure that there is a wealth of sources and storytellers in the mix, doing the work that needs to be done and not going out of business, because that can happen so often. So really, how do we support this really specific set of the ecosystem, and how do we do it in an intentional way?
Awesome. And my last question for you, outside of this particular fund, how else is Google really speaking to those small, diverse businesses that are really getting the attention from media, news, and things like that?
Yeah. One of the things that I'm so excited that we do is when we're not at the forefront. There are many times where we will partner with organizations or try to support people who are coming into the space who, you know, should be the ones who are out front. I'll give you an example. There's a group called Capital V, led by Lauren Williams. They launched their business in Atlanta and coming in more cities. When I hear about that, we say, how can we come in as a partner to help you get off the ground? So again, it's not that Google did this. You have some really smart, bright business people that we can then get behind. And it's not like an invisible hand or anything like that, but it's groups like that that I get so excited when we can support. Or there's a group called the Maynard Institute that is really dealing with challenges around, you know, systemic racism in newsrooms. And how do you break that down? That's who we can partner with and make sure they get the resources that they need when they go in newsrooms, and really try to deal with some of these big challenges. So this is big and glossy and shiny, but there's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes that gets me just as excited. That again, we're not out here looking for credit. We're not looking for pats on the back. It's really who's out there doing the work, and how can I make sure you know that Google is here to help you, whether everybody else knows about it or not. That's not the intent. It's how can we move in the background as well.
Awesome, awesome. Well, this isn't a great initiative. Definitely something I want everyone to know about. And thank you so much for one speaking to us today, but also the work that you do in terms of representation and making sure that these diverse and these underprivileged and minority organizations are really getting the same opportunities as best as possible to definitely be great and to succeed. So thank you so much.